Hey. How is everyone? When is y'all's lunch? Oh, man. So you guys are not thinking about poetry at all like you usually are. You're just thinking about food. Whenever I do workshops in I don't remember being as consumed and obsessed with food as maybe students these days. Whenever I do like workshops in class, like half the class just writes about being hungry and eating, just like nonstop. Which is cool. I'd say 75% of my day-to-day conversation is just about food. So I don't know why I'm complaining. I don't know why I'm boobling to you guys about food right now. Maybe I'm hungry. I don't know. But yeah, enough of that. Let's do some poems. Y'all in? Y'all ready to win? Oh man, like 5 of y'all ready to win? Like, come on. Let's all be ready to win. Yes. Y'all don't even know what y'all are ready to win. Oh man, all right. In my underwear, I write poetry. Two-headed poetry. Three-legged poetry. Poetry with tin spigots and no training wheels. There are flames airbrushed across my back, and I have bare feet. I have bare feet. Feet. Speak up, I walk with sticks in my ears and filling twigs with sentences, filing my nails down with memories. My love, it can shave diamonds. Scientists speculate over it. I come from the moon. Neil and Buzz and that third guy, they walked across my tummy. I giggled in a spoonful of cherub, tasted like cherries and wallabies. I write 2 underweared poems. My poems take off both underwears and dance naked around the candelabra in the living room. I am writing wrists and rubber bands on the back of the belly's bathtub. Pressing my lips to the shower curtain, I whisper, the goat man is in the woods dancing, the chupacabra, the bookman, the golden nugget. There is a cloud splintering like a kneecap inside of my leg. Buy me pants, mother. Buy me a hat. There are moths in my shoulders. I am shaking. I am full of love. I was full of love. I carved out pear-shaped slices of it and fed 1,000,000 tired ankles. God sat on my shoulder like a cricket. I swatted a bee like a father's advice and asked for it again. Where can I go when every bridge has wheels running alongside its bottom? But I write poems with no training wheels. I write my skull like it was a collar I was picking up and examining inside of my hands for the very first time. Standing at the corner of Central Park East and 63rd Street, I hold an imaginary football like a small child, stand 2 inches in front of a yellow wall and scream directly into the wall's bricks, "Go deep!" As I fling the pigskin against the wall, I try to catch my childhood bouncing back at me. Go deep! I am a 3-headed galumph, a blue giraffe, a water fountain on the moon. Catch me, carbon, catch me, galumph, catch me, galumph, catcher, catch me. Lord, hold me like a bowl, like how the clouds hold the moon, holding the rooftops of this city and my memories. In my veins, there is a lonely mermaid, murmuring all day long. She sing, you sing, such beautiful songs. Her throat is a girl I once knew. Her nose is made of silver. Her backbone is a plum. Her backbone is a plum. Thank you. So my name is Anis Mojgani, and I originally am from New Orleans, Louisiana. I live in Portland, Oregon, and I spend a chunk of my year traveling around performing poetry, mostly to doing shows at colleges and universities, sometimes in high school settings like this, sometimes at literary festivals, sometimes for other unique, strange endeavors. And I do that for about a third of the year, and the rest of the time I'm at home, managing all that and writing poems, painting pictures, doing things to keep my creative mojo alive and floating. And so that's what I do. Yeah, I was going to share some more poems, but before that, I just wanted to see if there was any questions about whatever. Anything. Oh, here we go. We'll go with you, good sir. The most influential piece of literature in my life. When I was, I would say that there's two things. So when I went off to school, when I was 18, that was when I first started writing a lot more poetry and exploring and seeing what that relationship was, and got really interested in performing work. And at the end of my first year of college, there was a poet named Jeffrey McDaniel, who is a performance poet. He was a slam poet, a spoken word poet, and he was amazing. I'd never seen anything like that before. And I bought his book, and this book of his, which is his first book of poetry, this book called Alibi School, is probably what I've read more than any other book. Like that first year, I just read it cover to cover hundreds of times. And that really opened me up to different ways that poetry could be used to communicate to people, and different ways that images could be sculpted, and that was highly influential. And the other book is a very different type of book. So I went to, as I was sharing with some of the students earlier, I went off to school to study comic books. I didn't set out to be a writer. I didn't set out to be a poet. I went to school to study drawing and writing comic books. And one of the books that we would study in class is this book called Understanding Comics by this guy named Scott McCloud. And it basically is just this book that breaks apart how comics are used as a medium to communicate and tell stories, which sounds like it could be incredibly boring, but it's a really amazing book. And he does it through comics and through a graphic novel form. And that book is something that has inspired and influenced how I tell stories regardless of whatever medium, whether it's through drawings, whether it's through music, whether it's through poetry. All of it kind of is very much based on a lot of those ideas that Scott McCloud talks about. And did you have a question as well? What you got? Oh man, I'm not good at describing things in one sentences. I write poetry, I feel like this is a game show. I write poetry that takes my experiences and funnels them through sort of a strange, magical, surreal lens to just create weird little stories that hopefully other people are able to see aspects of their own life inside of. So that's how I would tend to describe it. I thought I saw a hand floating somewhere over here. Is that? Boom. In high school, I didn't explore a lot of music on my own in high school. I listened to a lot of the radio. And there was like little blips of things that would come onto my radar. But like in high school, I really loved listening to the Counting Crows. I remember listening a lot to the Cranberries. I remember catching Outkast was not the thing that they were now. Like I think when I was in high school, like they had just put out their first album, so it was like they would sometimes surface somewhere on the radio, and I was like, what was that, you know? But I really didn't start exploring a lot of music kind of like on my own until I got to college. Like just before I went off to college, it makes me feel so old, but like, so this was in the era where CDs were what was like big. We didn't have iPods, we didn't have iTunes, we didn't have like MP3s, none of that. And a friend of mine took me to the record store to buy me a CD for my birthday. And I think that was like the first time I'd ever like bought a CD. It was just before I went off to college. And I got this album that a friend of mine had me to, this album called Rain Dogs by this crazy, awesome musician named Tom Waits. And that was like the first thing that sort of like opened up me to me like, oh, I'm a person of my own that can go off and find and purchase and listen to whatever music I desire. And so at that time I started listening to a lot more Tom Waits. I started listening to a lot of Tori Amos. I started listening to a lot of Outkast. And there was just like a wealth of different music that I started listening to. And that's as I proceeded through college, that at some point there was a period where the internet started becoming a lot closer to what it is now. And there was like all these places to find music and introduce me to music. And I started listening to a lot of indie rock. Death Cab for Cutie and this guy Damien Gerardo, Broken Social Scene. And like these days I listen to a pretty widespread amount of stuff. You know, there's some stuff that's older that I listen to. Bob Dylan and Townes Van Sant, Nina Simone, Miles Davis. And then there's stuff that I listen to that seems very different than, say, Bob Dylan, like Beyonce. So it just sort of depends. The Fleet Foxes, you know, like really, really whatever. I don't listen to the radio so much these days. I don't listen to pop country. That's probably about it. Everything else I'm sort of open for. Way in the back. I went to this place in Savannah, Georgia called the Savannah College of Art and Design.
When did you know you wanted to become a writer?
It was at sort of like different parts of my travels. So when writing was not something that I was really like serious about when I was a kid. I probably wrote stories. There's some composition books in my parents' house that reveal that, but it wasn't something that fueled me. Like I really loved drawing a lot, and I was an imaginative kid. I liked art. I liked creativity, but writing was not where that creativity lay. And so writing didn't become something that I started exploring until my senior year of high school. I took a creative writing class, and it interested me and intrigued me. And at some point when I was in college, I started writing a lot more and started performing a lot more. And Savannah, Georgia is a pretty small town. And I was performing a lot of poems while I was going to school for art. And as I was performing poems, people were responding a lot to the poetry. And there was definitely a period where people started referring to me as that poet guy. And there was definitely like some resistance to that, like, it's like I'm not a writer, I'm not a poet, like I'm an artist. These are the things that I like to create and explore. But I'd say like when I was about like 20, 22 or so, 23, I was just really interested in my relationship with writing poetry and performing poetry. And that was around that time when I decided like, well, I'm going to move in this direction and see what that holds. And so that's when I became a different kind of writer. And when I decided to just sort of like pursue this as a job, I had the opportunity to just kind of like continue doing this as a job. That then defined me as a different kind of writer. And so I've been a professional writer, I guess, for about 10 years now. I had more and more opportunities to just do this type of thing, so I decided to start doing it. And then there was a question over here. What did I do with NPR? So, like, there was, up in Seattle, there's this poet named Jeremy Richards, and he used to work for NPR, and he was a poet within the Poetry Slam community, which is an area of performance poetry that I come from. And Jeremy used to work for NPR, and he had a show that he would collect poems from different people, and play their poems on NPR. It was an NPR show that he did. And so that was like the first time that some of my poems started going off onto NPR. That was like probably, I guess, like 2006, 2005. And then I've had the good fortune to, in Portland where I live, there's a really great show called Livewire Radio. And, whoa, dun. Called Livewire Radio. And Livewire is sort of a variety show, kind of like similar to old school radio shows, programmings. And so they have like guests and they have little like comedic sketches. And over the years I've performed on there about like 3 or 4 times. And that's also an NPR affiliated show. So that goes off onto the NPR airwaves. Any other questions at the moment? All right. Enough answering, Anise. Let's do some more poems. What time are we in here till? 12:05? All right. I'm 38 years old, and I'm trying to figure out these days what being a man means. I don't drink, fight, or love, but these days I find myself wanting to do all three. And I don't really have a favorite color anymore, but I did when I was a kid, and back then that color was blue. And back then, I wanted to be an astronaut, I wanted to be an architect, an artist, a secret agent, a ranger for the World Wildlife Fund, and a hobo. And when I was 6 years old, I used to always throw my clothes in my blue and yellow plastic and vinyl Hot Wheels car-carrying suitcase and run away to beneath the dining room table. I've been in love 3 or 4 times, so I doubt I want to try that much more often, and I spend most days making pictures or thinking about making pictures, and I dream too much, and I don't write enough, and I try to find God everywhere, trying to figure out this thing he made called a man. And the television tells me that it's bare-knuckled bombing, and if I drove a tank or was a movie star, I'd be one, but my pops does neither of those. He drives 45 minutes to water flowers. He puts the garbage out twice a week. I'm sitting on the bus when a 7-year-old boy carrying a book of Robin Hood, he sits down next to me and he asks me my name. Anise, that's a nice name. Thank you. What's yours? Quentin. Anise, do you want to read with me? So tell me what my fists keep writing. My fingers open up like gates when I type, and the wind is swinging in the wake. I lift bridges with poems, and forests grow in my mother's eyes. I'm looking for God, Quentin, while this world tries to forget you for trying. For this world, Quentin, it hates your eyes, for they are small and they are pure. And Quentin, this world hates your fingers, little like the stems of flowers, for not being able to pick up the things that you have left behind, simply because you are still learning to do so. I don't drink, fight, or love, but these days it's only 2 out of those 3 that I don't do. And I've fallen in love 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, Quentin, so I don't want to, but I still do. And I want to find God in the morning and in the tired hands of dusk at the mouth of the river and down by its feet. But instead I drive 60 through residential streets praying to hit a child that he may stay forever full of night and life and simple outstretched limbs, trying to pick up way too much, way too fast, forgetting what it means to be a person in a world where egos are measured with tabloids, where automobiles double for morals, where beliefs are like naps, you leave them behind when somebody touches you, and in a place where oil always seems to take precedence over life, I find myself sitting on a bus watching a small boy float down like fresh water, carrying a book that I used to, asking if I want to see what he sees, if only for a little while, and I do. And then asks if I want to give to him what I see, if only for a little while, and I read to him. And then says to me he's going to show me the world, and starts reading me the sentences himself, his hands dancing back and forth across the pages, stumbling over words, skipping whole lines because the fingers are moving faster than what they're showing his eyes. I want to tell him, slow down, Quentin. Slow down. You don't have to touch and go. You can see it all if your finger whispers on one word. Slow down and hold what you see just a little while longer, for in a world full of fast, fast faces, I'm looking for God everywhere, trying to figure out a little better this little thing he made called a man. Thank you. So there's 2 of my favoriteest people on the planet live in the state of Illinois. One in Chicago, his name is Robbie Q. Telfer, and the other is lives in Bloomington, and her name is Shani Jean Maney. And the 2 of them, some years ago, created this show called the Encyclopedia Show. And it's a show that started in Chicago and spread its wonderful creative tentacles across the globe. And what it is basically this show that's, it's kind of like a literary variety show of fact and BS, where they have a topic for each month. So like maybe the topic might be bears, and then they invite people to create work with assignments. So somebody might be assigned to create something about a polar bear, and somebody else might have an assignment to write something about the Chicago Bears. And then all this hoopla happens on stage. So a few years ago, I was participating in one down in Austin, Texas, and it was on stereotypes. So this is called 21 Thoughts on the Stereotype that All Brown People Are Terrorists. And if you hear me skipping around, it's because I tend to not read the whole thing because it feels a little bit long. So 21 Thoughts on the Stereotype that All Brown People Are Terrorists. 1. My mother is black. My father, Iranian. As an American, this means that I am born under 2 bad signs. 2. Acts of terror are constituted by the use of violence against civilians to intimidate and induce fear. 3, I'm not certain, but I don't think every brown thing is hoping to commit acts of terror. I've encountered a number of brown dogs that were not terrorists. This is not to equate the brown man with a dog. I'm just saying it's interesting. 4, I have known my fair share of white dogs that were complete crapheads. 5, my parents have 3 brown chairs. Only one is a terrorist. 7, there was such a craziness that came with the sorrow of our country after 9/11. We became so crazed with our fears. I had dreams of men on the street beating my father because of his name and accent. 8, my father, not a terrorist. 9, the census labels Middle Eastern as Caucasian. 10, Dick Cheney, not brown. 11, Noam Chomsky says, if they do it, it's terrorism. If we do it, it's counterterrorism. The machine of propaganda is a strange and colorblind and colorful machine. During World War II, comic books pushed forward stories centered around American supermen triumphing over the evil Germans and Japanese while shuffling Japanese Americans off into camps. It is always easiest to turn our hearts by affecting our eyes. 12, the Red Scare was based on fear of the unknown. Fear of opposing ideologies. McCarthyism was a terrorist act committed by a government on its own people. 13, 10 years after the building's fall, I'm in the airport security line, and the woman asks me if my name, sounding a tad bit foreign, and my face, looking a tad bit Baghdad, asks if the name is a family name. I have never known there to be a different kind. 14, growing up, my favorite television show was called MacGyver. For those of you unfamiliar with it, MacGyver dealt with a gentleman who could make explosives out of whatever happened to be on hand, be it a peppermint and a ball of string or a pencil case and 3 cardboard tubes. I watched it religiously, 4 years. I never learned how to make a bomb from watching it. 15, Osama bin Laden, not white. 16, my friend Tim Perkins told me when he was a kid he went to a largely black school. He's white. One day his friends were talking about white folks and he asked, well, what about me? They said, you're not white, you're Italian. This has nothing to do with terrorists, but I do find it interesting. 17, the most famous American domestic terrorist, Timothy McVeigh, killed 168 innocent people in the Oklahoma City bombing. Timothy McVeigh wasn't Italian. 18, the IRA has committed acts of terror for 70 plus years. Britain began theirs long before this. 19, the American presidency, like the leadership of all nations, comes with it the administrating of acts of terror for the betterment and protection of its citizens. The terrorist acts of our leaders do not necessarily mean they were more courageous, simply quieter. 20, sometimes when I watch the television, I ask myself, is that brown man a terrorist? What about that one? And that one is he. The first man is Wayne Brady, obviously. The second is Aziz Ansari. The third is my president. I do not know the answers to my questions. 21, Public Enemy tells me this country is a fear of a black planet. Such heavy clothing fear becomes upon our bodies. Your coat will not protect you, no matter how clean, how starched, how bright it may be. We are all Russians. Every one of us Russians born under a strange time in American history. So when I write poems, I generally don't, that's a unique poem because it was an assignment. So, it was like, write something about this idea. But generally, most of my poems do not always have a very specific birthing place. A lot of it is just sort of me dumping things onto the page and then seeing what works when I put it together. I'm about to share just a little tiny poem that is has a direct birthing place, like that one, but also goes in a different direction than where I ever thought it would be, which is one of the things that I really love about writing poetry. And so, when I was 17 and first starting to write poetry, I wrote a love poem for a friend of mine named Rozzy. And then, a few years ago, Rozzy posted this photograph on her Facebook of a small lemon tree in a little pot of soil sitting on her kitchen windowsill, and it had this caption that read, "See the lemon tree I grew from a seed. See how big it's gotten. And I thought, that's a very sweet and stupid sentiment. I'm inspired to write a poem about a lemon tree now. And so this is what came out of that. Oh, lemon tree, I grew from a seed. How big you have gotten. You were so little when you were a seed, now so big. Soon you will carry round and lovely lemons, yellow and dimpled. When they grow too big for your thin branches and they leave this kitchen of mine, ask them not to forget it, this kitchen of ours. It is my favorite room in the house. And lemon tree, when you pick up to follow, please do think of me. I will think of you here when my hands are far too empty and my tongue is far too sweet. I will think of the quiet poem that was your shape. Lemon tree, please bring a scarf with you. Wherever you end up, it may be cold. And if it isn't, perhaps you will one day vacation someplace where it is. I was going to share one or two more poems with y'all, but before that, any questions about writing, performing, any of the poems that I shared, whatever? Improv. So, when I was in college, we would sometimes have an improv night. And actually, a number of my very close friends, my closest friends right now, are people that I first met from going to those improv nights. And so it is something that I have done in the past. And there's some folks that I know that are really, really amazing improvisational actors. You know, that it's like, you know, it's definitely something that is a talent and a skill to be honed and crafted. And I don't feel like I'm one of those folks. But there is a pretty large improvisational aspect to when I'm on stage. Like all the poems that I share on stage are poems that are all written and poems that I've memorized or read from a book. So like they're not anything that I'm like making up on the spot. And some of them are poems that have existed for a very long amount of years, a large number of years. So they're not, like I said, they're not being created on the spot. But there's a really large element, which is one of the things that I really love about performing, is that the shape and the tone and the energy of those poems is all pretty soft and malleable. And that direction of where they go is very much inspired by where I am that day, how I'm feeling in that moment, what the audience is like, what's the environment like, and all those things create a poem that only exists right then and there. And so it's sort of kind of like, a person, you're the same every single day, but you're also a little bit different. And in the morning, like you pull out this set of clothes, and the next day you pull on this set of clothes. And so it's like when I bring the poems up on stage, I don't know necessarily what those poems are going to be wearing until I start saying them. And so that's where some of the spontaneity comes in, and where it then allows it to keep a little bit fresh for me. Likewise, just like the shape of the show and how I interact with the audience and what I banter with them is all stuff that, while there's like little elements that are kind of like things to sort of like guide me as I go through a show, are all things that are subject to change. And so that, for me, that's something that's a lot of fun about being on stage, that I never know exactly what like me and all the people that are sitting in the audience at that given time are going to create together. Thought I saw another hand somewhere over there. Question? Yes? It's honestly it's a bit of both with probably the majority of them. I'm not a poet that sits down and writes with, I don't want to say that I don't write with purpose, but a lot of my poems are born out of not sort of like needing to address a specific thing. There's definitely things inside of me that need to be addressed and like spoken to and figured out and processed. But because those things don't have words, the poetry allows me to sort of like find my way through those, as opposed to being like, I feel angry. Let me write about this angry thing, and so it's like, I don't know what I'm feeling. Like, I just need to write and see what shape it takes. And so like that lemon tree poem is a good example. Like that is a poem that had a very specific point of origin. It was a response to this lemon tree of just kind of like, I for whatever reason, this caption really makes me chuckle that my friend wrote, and I want to write something about a lemon tree. And that's what it is. It's a poem about a lemon tree. Like on one level, there's nothing larger, no greater meaning than just that. It's like, I wanted to write about a lemon tree, and I wrote about a lemon tree. But I enjoy, and I'm drawn to writing poems that allow for other things to occur inside of them. Not just for the reader, but for myself as well. So like, there's a lot of things that when I read that poem that affect me in different ways, that speak to me in different ways, that have nothing to do with a lemon tree. And those things change. It's like the things that I assigned to that poem of holding meaning for me are different 8 years ago when I wrote that poem versus like the experiences in my life that are happening right now. And so I get a different thing from that poem. It gets assigned to different parts of my life. So I try to write poems that allow for both of those things. That it's very surface level things, like what I'm saying is what I'm saying. But the beauty of poetry is that you're allowed to have that while also having this thing that says like, it's also something like larger and bigger than that. And that might be different for you versus for me or somebody else in the room. Other questions? All right. Then we'll do another poem or two. Come closer. Come into this. Come closer. You are quite the beauty. If no one has ever told you that before, know that right now. You are quite the beauty. There is joy in how your mouths dance with your teeth. Your smiles are simply signs of how sacred your life actually is, so step into it. Come closer. Know that whatever God might be, he asked the world around him to help him make something of worth. He woke from dreaming, scraped the soil from spaces stuck somewhere inside himself. He made you and he was happy. You make that Lord happy. Come into this. Come closer. Know that something softer than us, but just as wholly planted pieces of itself into our feet, that we might one day dance our way back. Know that you are almost home. Come just a little bit closer. There are birds that beat their wings beneath your breastplates, gentle sparrows that ache to sing. Come aching hearts, come soldiers of joy, doormen of truth. Know that my heart was too big for my body, so I let it go. And most days this world thins me, to where I'm just another cloud, forgetting another flock of swans, having shaved off so many of my corners that I felt at home only in the shape of a ball, bending myself so far backwards that the song of my mother believed I was returning home. But believe me when I tell you that somehow this soul of mine still manages to squeeze its way into narrow spaces. Place your hand beneath your head when you sleep tonight. Perhaps you will find it there, making beauty as we sleep, making beauty as we dream, making beauty as we turn over. When we turn over in the ground, may the ghosts that we've asked our answers of do that turning, kneading us into crumbs of light and into this loved thing called life. Come into it, come, you wooden museums, gentle tigers, little giants. I see teacups upside down, glowing across your grins. Your hearts are like my hands. Some days, all they do is tremble. I am like you. I am just like you. I too at times am filled with so much fear, but like a hallway must find the strength to walk through it. Walk through this with me. Through this church of blood, bone, and muscle that is ours, there is a doorknob that glows like chance before you. Grab it, turn, and pull. Step through, back straight, chin up, eyes open, hearts loud. Walk through this with me. Walk through this with me. For you and I We are not so very different. We are more alike than we may appear to be. We all wanted a high school sweetheart. Wanted to be young in the 50s with meatloafs and sock hops and lawns so perfect they looked like Clark Gable was kissing them. We wanted to be 13 and alive and meet a girl that was 13 and alive and walk with her past the grandstands, to sit and hold hands with, to sit and sit with, to sit and kiss with, like it was something that you would miss, but that never was. We once went to bed like between the bed sheets was a valley where dinosaurs still breathed, and how we would capture these triceratops and brontosauruses, but even he was opened up with the smoke that rose out of the homes on the corners that we once climbed through, the streets and the footballs with which we once threw, the school desks upon which we once drew, the windows that sat open through which we once flew before the outside world of parking spaces and dead friends came flooding on in. And we forgot what we wanted, and we became what we become. Waitresses and bartenders, city employees in temp positions. We are junkies and one-kiss poems, and we cry the stars as we write our scars onto dumpsters and electric boxes, because the only thing that we can hear is our hearts, and the only ones listening are the streets, to the blood that breathes, to the letters we leave, and we dream to rise ourselves up out of these burning buildings, but instead we get buried somewhere beneath, because I know my life is like some high school kid's notebook. That kid that shuffles back and forth between school and home, stacking the letters and the pictures too close for anyone outside of his own imagination to read, because it's through the ink that his heart beats, that his heart breathes, and we all just wanted to write these notes. Check if you like me. Check if you don't. Check if you'll date me. Check if you won't, because we all wanted the love songs to be true, and we did love dinosaurs once, and we wanted the stars to hold our hands, to lick the teeth, to love us. So let your smiles twist, like my heart dancing precariously on the edge of my fingertips, staining them, like that same high school kid licking his thoughts using his Sharpie tip, right? And I was here. I was here. And ain't none of y'all can write that in the spot that I just wrote it in. I'm here breathing in, and you are here breathing out, and every breath I breathe brings me a second closer to the day that my mother may die, and every breath I take takes me a second further from the moment she caught my father's eye, and every word I carry is in the stone to put into place, in the foundation that I'm building these days, and erase something that I never saw, what all of us wanted and when none of us got, what we all had and had, what we all forgot, that we all wanted to be something, that we all became something, and it might not be the mess we started to be when we were kids, but something is still something, and like some cats say, something's better than nothing. Feet are smarter than an engine, and dreams are stronger than thighs, and questions are only answers we need to have to know that we are as alive as the time when I held the mind of a child, asking, why is 2 + 3 always equal to 5? Where do people go to when they die? What made the beauty of the moon and the beauty of the sea? Did that beauty make you? Did that beauty make me? Will it make me something? Will I be something? Am I something? And the answer comes, you already are. You always were. And you still have time to be. Thank you. So I think we have a couple minutes left. Any last minute questions? Yes? A lot of that. I mean, so when I do like a full show, it's usually sort of kind of like me just existing on stage for like about 50 to 70 minutes. And in that time, I'll usually do about maybe like 15 to 16 poems, something like that. And so there's usually about like 20 poems that are on deck. And I figure out what are the ones that I'm going to do. And there's usually sort of like a staple of poems that I almost always do. And those poems, I try to find a balance of familiar work to people that are there who enjoy my work and are fans of it, and also work that they might not be as familiar with, and introducing to other things. And work that is funny, work that is sad, work that makes your brain spin, work that makes your heart spin. So try to find a balance of all those things. But then definitely sometimes on stage, it's just kind of like figuring out like what it is that I feel like doing in that moment, or feeling like what might fit in the space, that has been created between like me and the audience and the stage. Thanks, y'all. Have a good day.